And it's actually not Scott Miller. Today we have a guest host. I'm Todd Davis on Utah's Talk Radio 105.9 and the iHeartRadio app. Your guest is Scott Miller, Executive Vice President at FranklinCovey and author of the newest book, Management Mess to Leadership Success, 30 Challenges to Become the Leader You Would Follow. Been talking with Scott about all of his leadership lessons along the way. And before the break, we were talking about something that Scott said he and most of those in leadership positions struggle with, and that is the skill of listening. Scott, let's talk more about listening, what you have learned there, what you need to still learn there, what we all need to learn there.
Yeah, I think Dr. Covey is probably the most profound evangelist of listening skills of anybody I've ever met, right? I mean, I didn't really even know there was an art to listening, clearly, until I came to FranklinCovey. And I think, as I said before the break, it is a leadership competency. Most of us as leaders find it kind of counterintuitive because one of my coaches tells me, Scott, you're always in convincing mode. You're rarely in empathetic listening mode. And she's right. And so my biggest area of growth as a leader, when I create the biggest messes, it's because I'm interrupting, I'm probing, I'm interpreting, I'm evaluating, I'm really on my agenda. I'm on my timeline, not the other person's. So I have learned, but not practiced, listening very well. Colleen Dahm, a colleague of both of ours, says, she's quoted as saying, I know the principle well, I've just yet to adopt it into my life. And I think it's a great quote because as Dr. Covey said, knowing isn't doing, and to know but not to do is not to know. So I think this talent of generosity that comes about when you listen to other people with your heart and your mind, you try to move off of your own agenda. Don't ask questions that are more important for you to know than they are for you to understand for the other person. It really takes a lot of patience and selfless as a leader.
Why you're generous to share how much you struggle with that. We all struggle with that. As you talk about those things, I think, my gosh, I do those same things. Why do you think good people? I like to think I'm a good person.
Yeah.
I know you're a good person. Why do we struggle with that so much? Why do we have this unintended, I think, agenda of interrupting or knowing everything or whatever?
I'm sure there's lots of different reasons. The ones that come to my mind are we're in a hyper frenetic world, right? We're always trying to do more, race from meetings, overcommitted, a lot going on in our life, unlimited choices. And so we sometimes treat our relationships efficiently and not effectively. And it's one of the biggest traits that I struggle with as a friend, as a spouse, as a parent, is knowing when am I being efficient and when am I being effective. And if you think about the difference, effective people slow down. They take a breath. They really truly are invested in the other person's pain, joy, success, triumph, challenge. And so I think it's challenging because we're all on a treadmill in life and it's hard to slow down. I also think we all like ourselves. We want to be loved. We want to be seen. We want to be validated and heard. So we're always subconsciously in the mode of saying, well, let me tell you my story, or here's how I dealt with that. We also want to help. And I think generally people want to help each other. And one of the ways we mistakenly help is try to fix things. And not everybody needs their problem solved or fixed. Most people just want to be heard and understood, not topped, not probed. And so I think it's difficult for lots of reasons for all of us.
I'm trying to, as you talk, I'm thinking of certain leaders I've had in the past and wondering what their reaction might be if they were told in their leadership role to slow down.
Well, I've been told to slow down my entire life since a child. And I think that's been helpful and harmful because one of my biggest talents is my productivity and that I think fast and talk fast. And some people like it and some people don't. When it comes to relationships, I think it's indisputable that I look at people that have really deep relationships. They take the time to really get to know the other person. And I think the wisest thing I've heard is when you're asking questions, ask yourself, are you on your agenda or are you on their agenda? Are you on your timeline or their timeline? Why do you need to know that? Their husband died. Why are you asking how or when or where? Does it matter? Maybe you should be asking, how are you doing? How are you feeling? How can I help you? If you're a great listener, you'll find you won't ask a lot of questions. You'll just listen and help how you can. It's counterintuitive.
Great insight. Okay, so listening being one of these, but what other mistakes do you think leaders, let's take it off your messes now, okay? Yeah. You're again, very, very willing and humble to admit your own messes, but just in leaders you've experienced in general, what other mistakes do you think leaders most commonly make that tend to impact their influence and their overall effectiveness?
Well, there's 24 left, so all of them. I think a couple, I'll rapid fire them. One, challenge 17 is called right wrongs. And it really is just the power of saying you're sorry and apologize. And this will sound convenient, but I learned this from you, Todd. And I learned this about 2 years ago. And that's the concept of an excuse-free apology. I don't know if others are like me, but my ego sometimes gets in the way of me offering an apology at all, let alone what you call an excuse-free apology by just saying, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I talked about you in a way that was not flattering, and I asked you to apologize or to forgive me, as opposed to saying, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that, I was busy, or I was tired, or she was really annoying, or everyone was doing it. Just don't attach any encumbrances, any excuses to it. So I think one is just offering excuse-free apologies. It can go so far. I think another one is this idea of really understanding the power of paradigms in our life. It's challenge 11, check your paradigms. That all of us have these belief windows, these frames, the lenses through which we see the world. You know, I was shaped as an early kid by my parents to believe that Catholic priests, police officers, and doctors are always right and always tell the truth. And we know that that's not true. Catholic priests can be some of the best and most horrific humans in the world. And that police officers plant evidence. And some police officers are dedicated to upholding the law, and some doctors are corrupt or not competent.
True of any profession.
It's very true.
Sure.
And but I was taught to believe that. And imagine how dangerous that could have been had I ever had to put those to the test. We have those same paradigms around people who are different than us, different races, different ages, different backgrounds, from where you're from, how much money your parents made, what kind of car your cousin drove. All these things unconsciously build a paradigm of how we see the world, of how we see ourselves. It impacts our blind spots about ourselves. It impacts how we view other people's opportunities and strengths and weaknesses. So for leaders to be uber aware of how they see the company, the culture, themselves, the world, the meeting, the project, the competitor, the marketplace, and constantly realize you don't have the full picture. And you probably don't have the whole complete right picture. Doesn't mean you're always wrong, but really to check your paradigms constantly, almost like nonstop throughout the day. Am I seeing this person's situation, myself, completely and whole? If you can master the introspection it takes to question your paradigms, you will constantly be growing and allow others to grow beneath you. Hallelujah. Amen. Praise the Lord.
No, that's awesome insight. You are known, and again, as you commented, we've known each other for 23 years, or just about 23 years. As I look through your leadership challenges here, number 27, celebrate wins. You are someone who is known to really place an emphasis on that. Not just goofing off, but really making sure that people feel valued and recognized for what they've done. Will you talk a little bit more about celebrating wins?
Yeah, I think it's really too easy to set goals that are ambitious but out of touch. I think it's easy for leaders to check off a success and move right on to the next. I think it's also easy for people to confuse smart, intelligent, well-educated, hardworking people, while those same people like to have fun and laugh and have enjoyment in the workplace. I think it was you, Todd, that reminded me that the average worker spends more time with your work colleagues, at least in America, than you do with your family.
Well, my wife reminded me of that.
Well,
so.
my wife reminds me a lot, but it is true, right? I mean, at least in America,
right. That's right.
We are a very hardworking culture. You know, I don't know about you. Well, I do know about you. Todd, you probably have about a 55, 60 hour a week job. And then you go home to a 50-hour-a-week family member job. And so you want to like people you work with. You want to trust them. You want to enjoy them. And so having fun and celebrating wins, I think, is just as important as setting important goals. Take the time, take the moment to celebrate, be goofy. It doesn't mean that you celebrate every win, right? Oh, they made it to work today. Oh, they parked their car without wrecking it. No, of course not, right? Don't insult people. But be mindful as the culture carrier. Make people want to come to work and laugh. I remember two colleagues we have, Chris McChesney and Mark Josie. They worked together in our Atlanta office. And they were two of the most productive people in our company. And they laughed their asses off in their office, having fun, having a great time. They loved coming to work. And I think office cultures can have more of that. You can work hard, have great successes, and still have fun. And sometimes, sometimes cut it loose.
I remember an early job I had. It was probably one of the most difficult jobs I ever had. It was laying carpet. I had a cousin who owned a carpet laying company, and then I had a friend who hired me on as his apprentice while I was between jobs, shall we say, early in my career. And it was physically the most difficult work I've ever done, lifting these huge rolls of carpet, cutting your fingers while you're trying to tack things in. And my friend Dave and we laughed all day long.
Yeah.
And just to your point, I had forgotten all about that, but I remember thinking this is the hardest work I've ever done, and I have never enjoyed it more because of that friendship and the things we had in common, things we laughed about.
I think it's so true. The more responsibility you have, the more burden you have, and the less time you have a chance to laugh. A good friend of mine and my brother-in-law, John Lofgren, works for our firm, and he and I a couple of years ago flew out to California to help our father-in-law with a garage sale. And it was full of hijinks and issues. And he's a great character who we love and adore. And having him part with his things was emotional. And we drove back in a big van of things he didn't sell. And John and I drove back for 12 hours and we laughed the entire way, telling the same jokes over and over again. One of the best days of my life. Just, remembering life's about enjoyment and appreciating your rewards and connecting with people. And we need to celebrate more and laugh more.
Boy, is that so important for everyone to remember.
From my lips to the world's ears.
That's right. Okay, you talked about this in our previous section for just a few minutes, but I'd love to dive a little bit deeper into it. Number 12, leading difficult conversations. I think every leader out there, whether I've been a CEO for 20 years or whether I'm a brand new frontline leader, it's one of the things that no one enjoys. I don't care who you are. I don't. Well, actually, I do have one friend who loves to argue, but I don't know that that's leading a difficult conversation. That's just arguing. So,
is his name Scott Miller?
No, it doesn't work for our company. But I just think it's something that if we could have that go away, if there were no more difficult conversations, there would be many leaders that say, "Gosh, my job isn't so bad," because it's hard to have those difficult conversations. I'd love to hear your take on successfully leading difficult conversations.
Yeah, I think it's a gift that you give to your employee when you can summon the patience, the stamina, the courage to sit down in the right environment with the right level of humility and consideration and say, "Hey, I want to talk to you about something I think will benefit you tremendously." It might be uncomfortable, a little awkward. We've all been there. I've been the recipient of the same types of conversations many times. But there's an issue I want to talk to you about. And it might be about a variety of things. Could be performance, could be their personal hygiene, honestly. It could be their productivity. Could be, are they in the right role? I think it's not just a gift, but it's a necessity. I have been the recipient of it so many times. I remember my dear friend, Bill Bennett, who now is the president of a competitive firm. When you and I both know him well, was the president of one of our divisions here for, a long time. He was my boss. He both promoted me and moved me to Chicago. I'm 60 days in my job. Bill shows up for a scheduled meeting. He sits down in my office and says to me, "I'm not kidding you, Scott, you're standing at a gas station holding a match." You don't ever forget that. I can tell you the color of the rivets on the chair. It was so visceral. But he was irritated at me that I wasn't keeping confidences. And I was sharing not, SEC-worthy stuff, but I was sharing things I shouldn't with my colleagues and junior people. He was disappointed in me. And it was then Bill sitting down for a few minutes and specifically calling out what I was doing that was life-changing for me. He could have fired me. He could have put me in a performance plan. He could have not given me a second chance. But it wasn't easy for Bill. I don't think Bill's a naturally courageous person. He's a diplomatic person. He's a trustworthy person. He's He's a humble person.
But he cared enough about you.
He did.
Mm-hmm.
He did. He cared enough about saving me from myself. And I told this story hundreds of times. It is the biggest gift you can give your employee is to move outside of your comfort zone and tell them something that they're blind about or that they know, but they need you to speak it out loud, and they will thank you for it. And if they don't, they will still be thankful.
Interesting that you bring up Bill Bennett as an example, because he was someone who gave me some courageous feedback. Right. Not as courageous as you had, but just some things that I was doing that I didn't realize I was doing to make me more effective, and in a very courageous but diplomatic way.
Maybe he's more courageous than I give him credit for.
Well, no, I just think he values people.
He does.
And to your point of great leaders, I think he values people and says, "Gosh, while this might sting a little bit, I want Todd or I want Scott to know this, because in the end it will help them." And what a gift that is.
And there's lots of ways you can do it, right? It's not a crime to send someone an email that works for you and say, "Hey, there's a sensitive point I want to talk about. It's regarding your X, Y, and Z. I'd like to set a time that we could talk about it in a safe environment, no harm, no foul. We're going to work through it. I just want to talk to you about it." There's lots of ways you can do that, right? You can, I think it's usually best when you let someone know there's an issue to address it as soon as possible, because if you're like me, I'm going to go on overload paranoia thinking about it and go to the worst case scenario. Right. So there's a lot of humanity that comes making sure you have it swiftly if you soften the beach. Nothing beats calling somebody in. Don't sit behind your desk. Sit on the other side with them, or take them to a conference room or to the lunchroom and just sit down and say, "Hey, there's a topic that I think if you and I talk about, it's going to help you tremendously. The stakes are high."
Take him to the lunchroom with a lot of people sitting around
maybe like not during lunch, right?
Right.
Maybe some corner,
a private place.
Right, a private place, whatever is appropriate in your culture. Take them for a walk around the campus, right? And just talk through something. Yeah, huge gift.
Great point. Well, so it sounds like Bill might be one of these, but when you think of other great leaders, and again, now maybe you reference these, maybe you won't, but putting the 30 challenges aside, when you just think about great leaders you've had or you've seen others have, what are some of the attributes and behaviors that come to mind?
Well, I think some of the things we've just currently mentioned, I think setting vision is enormously important for leaders. It's actually called Create Vision Challenge 22. But you can't just stop there, because you hear about a lot of visionary leaders who can't bring it to action, who can't get it done because they're so visionary or they're so challenged with focus. So I think not just creating vision, but then actually delivering results, which is challenge 26. There is this beautiful balance of being able to be a big thinker, but someone who can actually roll up their sleeves and actually make it happen. Not just through their team, but with their team. That you're not afraid to roll up your sleeves and help get it done and use some of your political capital. Right? Because sometimes as a leader, it might take you 10 minutes to what might take someone else 2 days. So I think there's this balance of thinking about tomorrow, but making sure today actually happens as well.
Pitching in.
That's right, because I think there's people that, as you and I know them, we fall into this sometime that have this enormous creativity and unbridled passion and spirit, but can't bring it to fruition. And other people whose heads are so down kind of in the thick of things, getting stuff done, that they can't think about tomorrow, next month, next quarter, next year. And it's this kind of always, as Dr. Covey said, are you working on the system or are you working in the system? And I think just this combination of asking yourself, doing both, am I doing both? Am I lopsided? Is really important. And then I think at the end of the book, although there are 30 challenges, I add a bonus chapter, if you will, and I call it, What About Character? Because although I didn't mention one of the 30 challenges as character, we all know that, to quote Joel Peterson, the chairman of JetBlue and a board member and a friend of ours, character is your ticket to the game. There is no anything if you don't have strong character, if you're not trustworthy and ethical. And when you have a lapse, you admit it and you surface it and you reflect on it and you hone up to it, take responsibility, and hopefully get a chance to move on. So I think that what I'll end with on that is character counts more than any of these. And I thought it was so important. I didn't want to forget about it and kind of move it to the end to say, at the end of the day, you are trusted or not because of your reputation. And your reputation is a collection of all the decisions that you make in life. And your decisions are usually based on your values. And all those come together form your character.
I couldn't have asked for a more brilliant point to end on.
My pleasure.
It's excellent. No, this hosting gig is pretty good. I think I might come back and do it
I'm worried
again.
about it.
So much appreciate the insights you've provided and the insights that will be provided in your book, which I believe is scheduled to be released on June 18th. Available for pre-order now. Scott Miller, EVP at FranklinCovey. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Todd. Thanks for being the host and for having me on your program.